I'm Jonathan McHugh, Secretary of the Guild of Music Supervisors. We're here live at the State of Music and Media first annual conference at the beautiful Hollywood location of Emerson University in LA. And I'm lucky enough to sit here with the president of music at Universal Pictures, my old friend Mike Knobloch. Mike, tremendous year, my friend.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. They put together a hell of a splash reel for you. You've had, your run at Universal. Donna Langley's an old co-worker of mine from New Line, and you guys, and Jimmy Horowitz, I went to college with.
Right.
So you've had this amazing all-star team at your company, and you've been playing your position, shall we say, with a great role. Talk about the feeling of a movie company when they're on a roll like that, what it's feel like. Because I've been to cold companies, I've been with hot companies.
Right.
So talk about this role that you guys
we've been both. When I started, at Universal, I left Fox on the heels of Avatar, which is the biggest movie of all time, and left my gig to go work at the then Last Place studio, which there were people who thought told me I was nuts, although clearly it was the most amazing.
You were going for the big job.
I was going for the big job, but it was an amazing opportunity. It was a no-brainer for me. I didn't hesitate or flinch for a second. So it's been 5 years or 5.5 years, and Donna's an amazing leader and has built an amazing team, and I'm fortunate that I'm part of her team. She brought me in and basically said, there was no more specific mandate other than for her to say, build your team and do what you need to do. And, we just want great music for our films. And, she turned over the whole production team and the marketing team, and so to be part of that group that in that period of time has turned it over and been firing on all cylinders, and with what's culminated with this year's run, which is obviously like you couldn't have even dreamed this year. We've had any studio's had a year where any one of these movies from this year would have been enough to cause for huge celebration. So with franchise movies working, and original IP movies and musicals and horror films and all of that, it's just to be shattering studio records, industry records, and all of that. Like, to answer your question, it's amazing. It certainly exceeds all of our expectations. But we're also smart enough to know
it won't last forever.
It won't last, and it's cyclical. I was actually talking to Donna the other day, and she was talking to somebody in sports, I forget who, but basically the analogy would be, you've just won the championship, so what are you going to do next? You're not going to hang it up and retire, right, or just aim low. You're going to try to win the next championship. Sure. So you just keep going. Yeah. It's just the luck and timing and hard work and the grind that culminated in this year's releases is just, there's a certain amount of kind of magic dust on it.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember being at Jive Records, and we had NSYNC, R. Kelly, Backstreet Boys, and about 2 or 3 other things, all in the top 10.
Yeah.
That was the week that NSYNC sold 2.2 million records. And I'll never forget sitting with the head of sales in our marketing meeting. I said, Bob, I circle them all. I go, Bob, you should take note of this moment, because this will never happen again.
Right.
We'll never have this kind of role. And I literally remember that one moment where I pointed it out, because you just know.
You could certainly try, and you should. You got to swing for the fences.
Yeah.
Always swing for the fences. But it's just there's even things that happened that contributed to this year that weren't even part of the plan, right? The tragedy with Paul Walker pushed Furious 7 into 2015. It was supposed to be a 2014 movie, and same with 50 Shades. There was a casting issue that delayed the production and pushed it into this year. So the slate, it played out amazingly well, but we're well aware that maybe this time next year we'll be sitting around going like, remember last year? Like, you hope that's not the case.
Well, I think for last year too, for you, we talked about it before, and you brought it up again about Happy, where Pharrell is a big player, and to send Pharrell back to say, dude, I like this record, but it's not what we need. Well, that takes balls to a point, and it takes backing of your leadership to say, hey, I'm going to turn down Pharrell's record just so you know. And maybe he'll come back with something better, or maybe he won't. Well, he happened to come up with one of the greatest records of all time.
Right.
Now, it had its issues too, but you helped influence that. So those kind of things are what true leadership really does when you're on that top of the music pyramid.
Yeah, thanks. And by the way, I don't volunteer for the lousy parts of the gig. It just, the tough parts of the gig come with the gig, right?
Absolutely.
So if my job is to be the messenger who has to translate some, creative people's dissatisfaction with something, and be the one on the front line to call the artist to say, here's why that's not, here's why that's no good, or it's not working, and you're not going to insult them. It's terrible. You're never going to, but an artist who works hard and shows up with something, you got to respect the integrity of it and the attempt to get it right. But then there has to be a way to have that conversation about what needs to be different for it to really for it to work. So it's hard, and there's days where it's lousy to be the guy delivering that news, and there's times, by the way, where that story doesn't end with and that's how we made Happy. Sometimes it ends with that's how that guy lost his gig, and how we had to bring in somebody else, or we had to go license some song for the billionth time that song's been licensed because we're out of time and there's a deadline, and
And obviously cutting to this summer's Straight Outta Compton, which was, I guess, is now the most successful biopic of all time. Is that true?
Yes.
What are you up to?
It's true because we say so. No,
how much has it made so far?
I don't know the exact number. I think it's something like 150 million at the box office.
That's amazing
something
for an
like
urban
that.
film to make that kind of money.
Nobody.
A period urban film.
Right.
The urban films used to cap out at 35 million. That was the box office.
Well, success. It was made at a certain budget level because on the business side of the assessment of should we make this movie, you're only going to spend so much and spend so much on marketing and then run numbers at P&Ls at an expectation.
No foreign.
Right. Well, right. And that's logical. If any of us would have been sitting around as we were back then, it all made sense. You can't expect too much out of that movie, and you never know. And you think the base will show up, but in the kind of concentric circles of how much can it spread out from the core audience that you'd expect to show up to then other ethnicities and other ages and men and women, and for it to do that kind of business at the box office, you have to go. Those circles have to go pretty far out.
One of the great things about it for me was that you didn't skimp on the music. You went hard. You spent the money. You had the great songs of the early '90s, and obviously all the key elements of the music. You had to have their songs. But yet you had other songs of the period that were equally as big. And it felt like a major motion picture, which it was.
Well, listen, the difference between working on like the James Brown movie, where you're just going to try to get it right and hope that your information's accurate and you have some latitude to either make budget-conscious decisions or creative decisions or business-driven decisions. Excuse me. With Straight Outta Compton, Cube and Dre are in the room. Dre's on set every day. Even just the introduction of Dre's character at the top of the film, he's lying on the floor surrounded by LPs. Yeah. He picked those up. It's like you don't want to. You know what I mean? It's like if you weren't around, you would pick those albums and hope that you get the representation of his musical influences right. When he's there, you can't mess around. Right. So whether it's a source cue, whether someone's driving down the street and a source cue comes in, or just the quality at which the NWA music is being delivered in the movie, Cube and Dre are there. Tamika, on behalf of Eazy-E, she's involved in the movie. Gary Gray, kind of grew up with those guys and grew up in it. So this is not one where you're so many degrees removed and you just hope that you're getting it generally somewhere on target. You have to be in the bullseye of the target.
Right, and which is where I think a lot of biopics suffer, because it's all about people recollecting about what happened with this guy and this guy. These guys are, like you said, in the room, talking about how it was, keeping it as real as possible, and that I think is what translated for my son and daughter who wanted to see that movie.
Sure.
As soon as they knew about it,
right.
They were not disappointed, and that's really most biopics can't necessarily translate that, where this did all the way through.
It's got a real story, and it's got heart. It's got some real soul and heart, and there's also, just like I was saying about the year that we're having, just the timing and the relevancy of the subject matter of police harassment, free speech with F the police and all of that. While we were making the movie, you would turn on the news and see Ferguson, and day after day, you would be looking at the screen that the movie was on going, God, that was 20, 30 years ago. So that was crazy that happened, and these guys were commenting on it as artists and everything. But then you would think to yourself, surely decades later, things have changed, and then you turn on the news and see. So I just think, not that we want to benefit or capitalize on tragic news headlines, but it infused the movie with some relevancy and some importance that maybe it wouldn't have in another chapter of what's going on in the world. Not to mention the fact that Cube is a hugely successful movie star, so just his stock is high as an artist, and he's relevant. And Dre, as he's a mogul, right? And you know, with a lifestyle brand, and still is a record producer and an artist who just dropped a record timed with the film. You know, so just those guys, where they are now, where they came from, what their story is, how it fits into the you know, kind of social, political landscape of what's going on in the world. It's just kind of lightning in a bottle for all of that to converge at the same time.
So, talk about, you know, this event obviously is the first of its kind.
Yeah.
You know, we've done, you and I have spoken at numerous other people's events.
Yeah.
To actually do our own Guild of Music Supervisor event, and the whole guild itself, and you know, you supporting it. How do you feel about the whole process so far? I
mean, sitting here, it's a forehead smacker of like, how did this not happen sooner? Right? It just makes so much sense that of all these types of events, whether they're put on by this company or that brand or whatever it is, for the Guild of Music Supervisors, as it's evolving and maturing, to do something like this, it just makes too much sense, right? And I'm so impressed between the venue and this partnership with Emerson and I've seen the schedule, and I attended some of the other events today. It's all A-listers. This is not people degrees removed from, you know, the subject matter of this. This is members of the guild and A-list supervisors and executives and creatives and songwriters. And I mean, it's like I said, you asked the question now of like, how did this not start happening however many years ago? But I'm so impressed. I've been saying it all day. I said it to you, I said it to John Houlihan and to Maureen and to Tom. I'm so impressed, and I'm so thankful that this organization has been growing up in the way that it has, and kind of carving out its niche and planting its flag and staking its claim to its turf. It's just nobody is more supportive than me as a music supervisor on the studio side of it. And I just, you know, I hope this is the first of many of these.
I think it will be. And last thing, obviously you and I both had amazing experiences volunteering our time for the Grammys.
Yeah.
Talk about your relationship with the Grammys and what it has brought to you.
Sure. I mean, you brought me in, right? You and Maureen, you were chapter president.
Yeah.
When I started on the board, and since then I've been on the board. I was vice president of the LA chapter, and then president, and then I did 2 terms as a trustee, and now I'm just back on the board. You know, the Grammys, my career trajectory has been so intertwined with the Grammys. You know, it's been this mutually beneficial kind of my only extracurricular other than my family and my job. The only other thing that gets a lot of my time is being involved in the Grammys, and I'm also now on the Music Cares board. So I think I've benefited hugely from being involved in the Grammys, making the relationships that I've made, having, whether it's, you know, these causes that are important to me that are all Grammy branded initiatives, whether it's mentoring and, you know, the birth and evolution of Grammy U or Grammy Camp, or mentoring in schools, or now Music Cares, artist rights and advocacy with all the stuff that goes on the Hill and everywhere else. I don't know how else I would be so connected to all of those causes, and how I mean, it's a huge kind of compliment to my skill set to have spent so much time over all of these years, starting with you as the chapter president, going back to, when did you term out? Do you remember? Mid-90s?
Something, yeah, 90
right?
Something.
So like I said, as you know, if I've been doing this, you know, studio exec on the music side for 20 years, in those 20 years, I can't really imagine any of that without that significant component of my time with the Grammys being a part of it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time and your support.
Thanks, John.
Mike Knobloch, everybody.